and we've got our last but not least speaker. She's going to talk about something really novel. I'm really looking forward to this. Shifting to Hogwarts, astral projection, the next generation. And Samantha Lee Treasure holds an MA in Medical Anthropology from SOAS University of London and has conducted fieldwork on out-of-body experiences in the UK and South Korea. Her chapter, Out-of-Body Experiences in the Screen Age, was recently published in Deep Weird 2023. And she's currently working on writing her first book. Samantha is between London and Geoje Island in South Korea. So exotic. With great pleasure, I welcome Sam to talk to us about astral projection. So are you there, Sam?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me last, because it's like 7 o'clock in the morning here and I might be drinking my tea. So yeah, don't pay attention to I just need a little bit of caffeine. But yeah, thank you for coming to this talk about this weird new phenomena that all the kids are into these days. Shall I share my screen?
Yes.
I have a few slides.
Wonderful.
Okay, right. So I'll be, because this is very much a media-based practice, and this is shared a lot online, I will be sharing a few videos as we go along. So just to give you an idea about shifting, I'm not sure if any of you have ever wanted to disappear into your television or immerse yourselves in your favorite TV program or film, or meet your comfort character, and just sitting on the sofa passively watching is not enough anymore. If so, you can relate to shifters. They tend to be Generation Z or teenagers. They're usually in their teens or early 20s these days. And even children are interested in shifting as well, like below the age of 12. So shifters are mostly, their goal is mainly to shift their awareness or their consciousness into either a fictional world or a parallel version of their life. And I'll kind of explain a little bit more about those ideas as we go along. So just to kind of get this out of the way a little bit first, I'll just talk about dreams, lucid dreams, and out-of-body experiences a little bit, because a lot of people say that shifting is just another name for lucid dreaming. And other people will say, well, it's, similar to astral projection. Personally, I think that shifting is a new mode of consciousness, which is custom made with this generation. And it's to do with their immersion in media, their on-screen lives, using all of these different platforms, switching back and forth between the on-screen and offline worlds. And these meditation techniques that a lot of them have adopted or adapted from lucid dream and astral projection practices. And some of them they've made up on their own as well. So I think this is very much a Generation Z mode of consciousness, and we can learn a lot from it, especially probably people, psychological researchers and anthropologists. This is basically a new way of using the mind that they're showing us. So dreams normally happen, or they always happen during sleep, normally during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, and sometimes during non-REM sleep. Whereas out-of-body experiences can happen also during sleep, during wakefulness, for example, because of an accident or meditation, or from dreams or sleep paralysis. So OBEs, out-of-body experiences, can happen in a lot of different contexts. And astral projection, I'll use the terms OBE or astral projection interchangeably, but astral projection usually refers to an intentional OBE. And Susan Blackmore, she's a psychologist and she's written extensively on OBEs. She thinks that what OBEs are is a backup model, because like at any given time right now, your mind is filling in the gaps in your perception, like the blind spot in between your eyes. That's filled in, especially when we're tired, and when our kind of the computer in our mind is lagging. So what we see is not always coming from the live senses. There's a mixture of what's in our mind and what's coming from the senses at any given time. So we always have these backup models of the world in our mind from memory and imagination. So she says that because out-of-body experiences happen either when there's too much sensory information coming in, for example, during ritual, when there's drumming and dancing and singing for hours, there's a lot of sensory information coming in, and your mind will get confused and you'll switch into a backup model. Or there's not enough sensory information coming in, like during sleep or meditation. Or there's contradictory sensory information coming in, for example, during drug use. So during that time, our mind, it goes on survival mode. So we switch into a backup, the most stable backup. And often this is from a bird's eye point of view. And there's an evolutionary idea that the OBE allows us to detach from physical pain and emotional pain, anxiety, depression, to kind of see and think very clearly about what to do next when you're in the body. The exit is over there. So once you're back in the body, you need to go to the exit. Or you're rock climbing and you kind of look from above and you need to put your hand up here to climb back up. So that's the sort of psychological and evolutionary view of OBEs. And this also would explain why the OBE is very realistic and very stable. It's not like a dream, it's not random, there's not usually symbolic images, and it's not changing. So in other words, it's not like waking life, which an out-of-body experience is more like waking life. And there's 2 points that I wanted to make here. So one is, I find that especially with Western people who have both dreams and out-of-body experiences, they might privilege the OBE over a dream or a lucid dream, which a lucid dream is that when you know that you're dreaming, and that can be realistic as well because your prefrontal cortex has switched on. So that's your sort of waking self. So your waking self is within the dream and then can act as you wish to. So that can be realistic too. But a lot of Westerners privilege the OBE, and I think that's probably because it's like waking life, and we are quite, materialistic, and we think that waking life is, we get all our ideas about reality and cosmology from our waking life. So I think that's kind of bleeding into our supernatural or anomalous experiences as well. Secondly, as our waking life becomes more virtual and more on screen, this might change. So if we have an out-of-body experience 100 years from now, where we're using virtual reality and augmented reality, it might become more possible for us to be in an OBE if indeed it reflects our waking life and our waking models. We might see fictional characters who appear in augmented reality walking down the street, or if we're using special contact lenses that put a filter on our worlds, so we might have a filter that makes everything look like a black and white film. We might see black and white out-of-body experiences as well. And another way that OBEs differ from dreams is that a lot of times right before the OBE, you'll get vibration sensations, and they can feel sort of like electricity coursing through your body. You can also get loud noises or the sensation of floating or separating from your body. But you don't always get the transition. It often happens when people start to have OBEs, and then the more they have them, the more streamlined it becomes. OBEs can also happen immediately. So one moment you're sitting on your chair, and then the next minute you're in the corner looking at yourself sitting in the chair with no transition and no warning. It can also happen after a period of unconsciousness, like sleep or fainting. And without dreaming or anything, you sleep and then suddenly you seem to be somewhere else, but you seem to also be awake. Your mind is very clear. It seems to be very stable, not like a dream. And you might actually think that you're awake. And another way that they differ is that dreams, especially REM dreams, have a lot of characters. And people that have both dreams and OBEs say that dream characters or lucid dream characters feel like window dressing. They don't feel real. They feel like they're a part of your mind. They're just there as a part of the setting. Whereas OBE characters or figures, they might not appear as often as dream characters, but when they do, they seem very real. And oftentimes, unlike dreams where you can see a number of different roles and they can be kind of unrealistic, with OBEs, a lot of the characters that you encounter, they might seem like they're other astral projectors or they're dreaming, or they might seem like they're there to teach you something or to guide you. So this is where a lot of people who have many, many OBEs, they develop very strong beliefs and relationships with spirit guides. But there's also sometimes negative entities that they can encounter, like shadow people or people trying to attack them. And that can feel more realistic and be a bit more scary than, say, encountering something like that in a dream or a nightmare. So this is just to show over time since 2004, the popularity of these different experiences. Sorry, my voice is going. So for some reason, the term out-of-body experience is not searched for a lot in Google. Astral projection seems to be a lot more popular, which kind of surprised me. I think out-of-body experience is mostly used in the academic literature, or it's a more scientific term, and astral projection is more of a spiritual or a paranormal term. And as you can see, so back in 2004, astral projection was more popular than lucid dreaming in terms of Google searches. And then around the summer of 2010, that's when the film Inception came out with Leonardo DiCaprio and Cillian Murphy, and that popularized lucid dreaming. And then after that, there were more films and TV series about lucid dreaming in many different countries. So lucid dreaming's popularity really spiked around then. And then it kind of gradually went down, and you can see that astral projection started to go up again. And then we suddenly get this blue spike. And this is for shifting realities, or reality shifting is normally what people search for. And this actually surpassed both astral projection and lucid dreaming in the summer of 2020. And then it kind of started to go down a bit. So just to say that this is not necessarily the search of shifters themselves or teenagers, because they tend to use TikTok. So the way the TikTok algorithm works is that even if they don't know what shifting is, if it's popular somewhere else or with people from their age group, the TikTok algorithm will show them videos about shifting. And so there's millions and millions of views of shifting videos because of this algorithm. It kind of snowballs. So personally, I wonder if this blue spike is parents wondering what their kids are doing during the summer of the COVID lockdown, and they're searching for shifting. So why did shifting suddenly become popular during summer of 2020? What was going on? As you guys probably remember, it was when the COVID lockdown really hit us. And because of social isolation, people staying at home, it kind of, it was similar to the long, dark nights of winter when people generally stay at home. and they turn inwards. They start to self-reflect more. They start to have deeper conversations, and interest in the supernatural also tends to increase during the winter time. So I was initially going to do my dissertation on reality shifting. And so I was doing the preliminary fieldwork and speaking to my supervisor about this. And myself, I got COVID at the time, so I had to defer a year. And by that time, I was living in South Korea, and I did my dissertation on Korean OBs instead. But one thing that my supervisor said was that she was a child of the 60s. And she said she sees reality shifting not as an obsession with media, but as a Generation Z specific form of escapism. So for her generation, they would have had more access to drugs and alcohol, and it would have been more acceptable with their generation back then. But during the lockdown, a lot of people didn't have as much access, depending on where you are, to drugs and alcohol. If you're not able to go outside and meet with a dealer or something, although there have been opiate and methamphetamine, sort of another pandemic going on in certain places, but generally for teenagers, their escape was media. And because we have this social isolation and media at the same time, this social part of social isolation really hit teenagers extra hard because they're in a key stage of their social development. And this whole environment of social isolation and media use caused people to supplement their regular interactions with parasocial relationships with media figures. So parasocial relationships are basically kind of one-sided relationships, but they end up feeling like they actually have a relationship with the characters on TV or celebrities, or it could even be social media influencers. And these days, a lot of celebrities are on social media too, so people can really kind of get an intimate sense of their personal lives and feel like they actually know them. Also, when I was a kid, I only had 4 channels, and I had 3 younger siblings to fight over that with. I didn't have the internet. I was also isolated. I grew up on a farm in Canada, and I kind of, video games were my escape back then. But I didn't have this on-demand media that the kids have these days. So they can really develop more parasocial relationships than my generation or older generations, because they're allowed to binge watch a series or a film. They can watch a film whenever they want to. They can stream things. Whereas, if I wanted to see a film, I would have to walk 2 miles to the video store if they had the film that I wanted to see, which they probably didn't. So they have, a completely different world that they're growing up in. And so in this kind of context, they have a big motivation to make these parasocial relationships a little bit less para. And then we get to shifting. So for this generation, shifting to Hogwarts from Harry Potter seems to be the most popular reality to shift into. And that could probably be because that generation grew up with Harry Potter over the years, and they can identify with the characters. There's been a couple of papers out about parasocial relationships with Harry Potter characters specifically. So they say that they're very socially attracted to them, and physically attracted to some of them as well. They can also relate to the isolation, especially during COVID. They might not want to be at home. They might want to be out with friends, even if out means being at school. And if the school is magical as well, all the better. So Emma Watson, who played Hermione Granger in Harry Potter, said that there's something about Harry Potter that makes life richer. Like when things get really dark and times are really hard, stories give us places we can go where we can rest and feel held. This generation growing up with COVID and also being worried about climate change and the economic situation, they really need this kind of safe space. It becomes a form of therapy for them. So there was an article written that quoted a therapist who said that this is kind of similar to how therapists help their clients develop safe spaces. And so they're doing that themselves. They're not able, so that some of the shifters that I spoke to said that they aren't able to afford therapy, or it's inaccessible to them, or they don't want to burden the people around them with their problems because everybody's busy. So this has become kind of a form of therapy for them. And there's a lot of different reasons why people want to shift. For example, there was one girl who was from Ukraine, and she said that she used shifting as a way to deal with what was happening in her country. And then on the other side of it, it's kind of used as entertainment. And I think the most funny way people use it is to date Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter. For some reason, people are really into Draco Malfoy, and I really don't understand this because he's the most miserable character from Harry Potter. And so people, there's like millions and millions of views on especially TikTok. Like, why is TikTok so obsessed with Draco Malfoy of all people? So people are wondering this online, and one common suggestion is that there's just a lot of girls with a bad taste in guys. An interesting suggestion was that this could be a chance for redemption, that they want to give this, misunderstood character a chance for redemption, even if that's in an altered state of consciousness. And this is similar to the phenomena of Snape wives, which an Australian researcher, Zoe Alderton, has talked about. So Snape wives was popular, I think, about 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it was mostly middle-aged women. Some of them were married, but they had this kind of obsession with Snape from Harry Potter. And they would use channeling and meditation to try and connect with Snape, like his sort of astral form of Snape, because they believed that J.K. Rowling did his character a disservice, and that he is somehow alive, or he's somehow real out there, whether it's that J.K. Rowling has channeled him from another dimension or something and made him real through her writing, or it's that there's kind of a collective thought form that has created Snape out there, like a tulpa or a thought form. So shifting normally lives on social media, especially YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. And these are the hashtags that you can use to find these videos or these posts. So people don't just want to shift to Harry Potter, they can also shift to a K-pop world, a Marvel universe, their dream college, their dream life. And there's many, many, many videos out there. They also can shift to video games. So you can see this video here has almost 1 million views, and this video has more than 2 million views, which I'll kind of come to that video in a minute. Okay. So there's different shifting lingo that refers to their cosmology. There's the current reality, and this refers to this reality, this core reality. There's the desired reality, which is their intended or target reality. And there's a waiting room, which is normally like a place that they find themselves in that altered state of consciousness, and before they actually go into their desired reality. And that's quite similar to an out-of-body experience, because sometimes you have the OBE and you start in your bedroom, and then you go out the window or out the door, and you're suddenly in a different location. A mini shift refers to a very short shift, so only a few seconds. A lot of times you can be successful at shifting, but then you get too excited or something happens, and then you're back in your current reality. And that also happens a lot to lucid dreamers or astral projectors. They become emotional, or they're like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. And then that emotional reaction wakes them up. And perma-shifting is the idea that you can permanently shift your reality or your awareness to a different reality. So that can be either fictional world, or usually with perma-shifting, the idea that you can shift yourself into a parallel reality. And we'll come to clones in a moment. But the two main ideas with shifting is the multiverse theory and the law of attraction. So this idea that, well, science says that there's a multiverse theory, and that there's, everything that we can do, if we blink, there's another reality. We branch into other realities. If we blink 1 second later, then we find ourselves in another reality. This is something that shifters often quote. And so they believe that using kind of the law of attraction or visualization, they can shift their awareness into these other realities. And I think that the reason that this is so popular with this generation too is that it's not a big jump for them to think about switching into another reality, because they're constantly switching between the on-screen and their off-screen lives and different social media platforms that have different affordances or physics. So clones are a parallel self that exists in an infinite number of worlds, including fictional ones. So they believe that just as you have a self here, there is also a body or a self in these parallel worlds that you can exist in, and you can shift into those. And while shifting, your current reality body continues on as normal. So this can mean two things. Normally, if somebody intentionally tries to shift, it's generally around sleeping time. So their body, their current reality body, will just continue to sleep. And then people who say this, who talk about this idea that we are constantly shifting all of the time, that just means that, while we shift, there's another, our original body from the current reality is just continuing on as normal, or another clone from another reality is taking care of business for you while you're in this other reality. So it's really interesting, like all of these teenagers are using their own personal experiences, a lot of which are like astral projection or lucid dreaming, and have their own kind of physics. And if you want to speak about it scientifically, like if we're in a different state of consciousness, the brain has different settings at that time. So things will look differently, just like how an OBE is more realistic or stable and a dream is more symbolic. So shifting is going to be a little bit different than the waking reality for them. And that gives them ideas about how reality works in general. And they also look to scientific ideas, and there's a lot of dialogue trying to work out how reality works. But there's also this idea that this is the core reality, and all of the other realities are kind of sub-realities that you can shift into. And then there's the idea that they're all equal, which means that clones from other realities can also come into this one. So there's sort of competing ideas within the shifting community. Okay, so techniques, there's a lot of different techniques. A lot of them, they adapt from dreaming and OBE practices, but the most important ones are scripting, visualization, and meditation. And scripting is basically, instead of just visualizing where you want to go before you go to sleep, they actually write it down, or they type it out exactly how they want their experience to play out. So it can also happen spontaneously to people. This person was really into Harry Potter at the time, and she was listening to music, and she suddenly felt weird, and she woke up and she felt that she was in Hogwarts. Then she got into shifting and wanted to do it more. And this is also very common with people in my generation or older who have an out-of-body experience, often spontaneously when they're a teenager, and then they become really interested in it and try to replicate it in their adult lives as well, using different techniques. So some of the most popular shifting specific techniques are the Julia method, which just means to lie down in a comfortable position, you close your eyes, and you keep repeating, I am, I am, I am. And you might start to feel some kind of symptoms like seeing white lights, or she says not feeling a part of your body again, so very similar to OBEs. And you can count to 100, or sometimes they count from 100 to 0. And affirmations are also very important to them. So I am shifting, I'm a powerful shifter, this kind of thing. And this is an example of how they share their techniques. So they shower first for some reason, they drink water, hydrate. This is an example of shifting, scripting. And meditation techniques from online. And then just go to sleep, and you might wake up in your desired reality. So this was the video that had over 2.5 million views and 500,000 likes. And I tried to show this video in the presentation, but it didn't work for some reason. But he said that it felt like going into a tunnel, and there was a noise in the video, kind of a whirring noise. And that's very similar with astral projection too. People say there's a mechanical or a whirring noise that happens, and they feel like they're going into a tunnel. And then one of the person comments, okay, but I've had these noises when I was shifting and it was scary. So there's other people that are having this experience too when they try this technique. And they asked, did they actually see a tunnel? And the creator of the video said, it feels like there is. So some people see tunnels and some people just feel them. So that's similar to an OBE or a near-death experience as well. And there's also, I'm going to go a little bit faster because I think I'm running out of time. There's also a tunnel method as well, where you visualize yourself going through a tunnel, and this is said to bring on shifting. So this is just to say that these shifting techniques, there's so many of them, and because we all have different biological and cultural backgrounds, if somebody uses a certain technique, they might get a different result. So this one sounds a lot like a hypnagogic image. So this person was binge watching a show for 4 hours, and then she started to visualize being in the show and kind of started to hear the voices of the characters from the TV show. And that sounds a lot like hypnagogic images or hypnagogic dreams that can happen, especially if you fall asleep binge watching shows, which happens to more and more people as we're on our screens and watching TV at night. So it's basically like roulette. We don't know if we practice this technique, if we're going to land on a lucid dream or astral projection or hypnagogic image or nothing at all. And this kind of makes a lot of the arguments about what shifting is, it's just a lucid dream and so on, kind of null. I also tried the shifting techniques myself. And although I've had both OBEs and lucid dreams and sleep paralysis, I kept having lucid dreams, and I wasn't able to like have a real sort of shift. So is there anything negative or anything that we should be worried about with reality shifting? For most people, it seems to be very positive. It seems to be kind of a form of therapy, a positive escape, and it allows them a sense of control when they don't feel a sense of control in their lives. It's also a private space, and where they can experience something without other people watching them or judging them, especially nowadays where everything that we do is online, or especially with this generation, and their digital footprint is there. It's going to be there. It's very hard to erase. So this is very much a private, safe space for them. However, it can also lead to negative escapism, and they can become unhappy with their lives. So it can be sort of like a crash after the high of a drug, and they can also become obsessed with this. Some people are already depressed or suicidal when they try to shift. So that's why they want to shift. But some of these communities are a little bit negative. So there was a website called Amino, where people who have an interest in a particular topic can discuss those topics on a certain board. And that was taken down because there were people saying that you can actually perma shift to other realities through suicide. So that's definitely not a healthy community to get into, especially for teenagers who feel isolated. So let's revisit the table of dreams out of body experiences and how shifting matches up with both of them. So shifting usually, so either we're always shifting or it usually happens around bedtime as well, like both OBEs and dreams. Like an OBE, it's realistic and stable. And like an OBE again, there are vibrations and noises, and there can be a sense of floating as well, or dizziness too. And again, like OBEs, the figures that they see feel real, whether they are fictional or not. So I was looking at how astral projectors interpret their experiences versus how shifters do. So astral projectors who are mainly, millennials or older, will say, I came back to my body when they're talking about the end of the experience, whereas shifters will say, I came back to my CR, my current reality. Sometimes, even though the environment is very realistic and stable, there can be some disparities in the environment. For example, maybe the fictional character looks a little bit different, has black hair instead of blonde, or they're in their bedroom, but they see that the wallpaper looks different than normal, or there's somebody there that isn't normally there. So for astral projectors, normally this is a clue that this is just a dream. It's not a real OBE, because an OBE is supposed to reflect what the physical world actually is. It's an objective reality, or it's a kind of a thought form. This is something that I or somebody else thought of. I was thinking about painting my wall red, but I painted it in purple instead, but I'm in an OBE and I saw it red because I was thinking about it. It exists out there somewhere. But for shifters and some astral projectors, this is evidence of a parallel reality. So I've gone into a parallel reality where I did paint the walls red. And when somebody has an astral projection, a lot of times, if it's a bit silly, they might ignore the experience and think it's not spiritually meaningful, or they defer to that experience, that they want to learn something from it, like about how reality works or something. Whereas shifters want to script the experience. They want to have control over the experience. And astral projectors often feel like they are exploring reality or the spirit world, whereas shifters want to explore fictional worlds or their parallel lives. So I was also talking to some astral projectors about this and looking at forums online where they discuss shifting. And a lot of them just say it's just a lucid dream, which we've kind of addressed already, that it's more similar to astral projection, actually. And then some people say they're just lying for likes and follows or monetization. So for example, there's this teenager on TikTok who, this is the only thing that I found of this, by the way. This person's talking about shifting and then says, sign up to the link and join my paid manifestation mentoring program to create the reality of your dreams. And we're seeing a lot of this with astral projection too, this monetization and commodification of these experiences, which might not inherently be bad, but I think it makes it look a little bit hokey for a lot of people who aren't already into it. And then some people say this is, late stage capitalism, and this is a sign that we're watching too much TV and it's seeping into these realities, it's taking over our lives. But so these kind of fictional worlds are not just happening to shifters, they're also happening to people in older generations too. So there's an American anthropologist, Robin Sharif, who talks about how the templates of dreams are changing. We're now dreaming about shopping malls and the Kardashians and screens, mobile phones a lot. And a lot of people that I've talked to who have out-of-body experiences in their teens back in the 90s were having cartoon-like OBEs as well. And it happens in sleep paralysis too. And this is what I'm currently writing a book about, that this is sort of seeping into every part of our minds, basically. And so I made a couple of videos. This is from my university project. And I just got the feedback from my professor, and he seemed to be kind of freaking out about this kind of late stage capitalism. And he said, is this US hegemony and the corporate world is like taking over our inner lives, which I found really amusing that he kind of freaked out about it. But I'll just share one of these. This is from South Korea.
내가 한 15살 3학년 때쯤인가 반 친구들이 어떤 학생을 앉혀가지고 목, 동맥 살짝 보면서 장난을 치는데 애가 갑자기 기절을 하고 애들이 막 뺨을 때리면서 다시 깨워. 그거 보고 신기해가지고 나도 저게 무슨 기분일까 어떤 느낌일까 하면서 그 친구 보고 나도 한번 해달라고 했어요. 기절했는데 갑자기 문 깜빡하면서 딱 떴는데 공 같은 몸이 멍 뜨는 하늘 그때 느낌으로 하늘 한 10m 정도 공 떠서 이렇게 나르는 느낌인데 그런 환경이 실물이 아니고 애니메이션 그림 같은 느낌. 나무도 이렇게 유치원생들이 나무 그릴 때 똑같은 그림이지. 색깔도 크레파스로 이렇게 색칠한 그 약간 그런 느낌. 길이 이렇게 언덕에 이렇게 언덕식으로 이렇게 펼쳐져 있는 걸 내가 그냥 날아서 가는 기분. 느낌상 한 10초에서 한 15초 정도. 그러다 갑자기 깼어요. 애들이 뺨을 딱 때려가지고. 처음에는 이렇게 동글동글하게 느껴졌다면 그때는 이제 빼쪽빼쪽하게 그렇게 느꼈어요. 근데 그때는 되게 한 6초 정도 만에 깼어. 금방 깼어. 색깔 자체가 좀 그러니까 해가 반쯤 졌다고 해야 돼요. 날씨 시간대로 한 4시 5시쯤 되면 좀 어둡잖아요. 그늘진 것 같으면 어둡잖아요.
So about 30% of people that faint will have an out-of-body experience. So this person said that he didn't think of this as an out-of-body experience because he's only seen OBEs in like Marvel Universe films, and he's only seen like superheroes that can control their journeys. So that to him is an OBE. He said for this, he was just floating through this cartoon world and he couldn't move, he couldn't direct his own movements. He could only kind of watch passively, but he could also like turn his head and his eyes. That was the only thing, which is kind of similar to sleep paralysis as well, where you can't move your body, you can only move around like this. There's another person who had many out-of-body experiences and saw shadow people sometimes, or saw the people who were in the room sometimes. So very kind of classic OBEs. But he was really surprised one day to have an OBE and to see at the foot of his bed Mickey Mouse dancing. And so this is definitely something that is happening to lots of different generations. So yeah, that's all. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to go ahead.
Oh wow, that was interesting. I've got a question. How can they control what happens when they do the shifting? Like, can they say, oh, I'm going to meet Draco and I'm going to go out to dinner with him, and like, does it actually
happen? Yes, for some people. So there's a lot of videos out there saying I successfully shifted and this is what happens. And they might even say, so they try to script it, right? As close as possible to what they want. And people say they do claim that they can successfully shift. There are also unsuccessful shifting reports that, the shifting went completely wrong and this happened and this person didn't act the way that I wanted them to. And that was similar to what happened with me when I tried shifting. I attempted to go into the TV show that I really liked when I was like 12, 13 years old. And for me, they were just lucid dreams. But when I became lucid in the dream, I might see the character from the show, but it was the actor and not the actual character, or the person's hair was different, or the setting was a bit different. So there are reports like that too. But the successful shifting reports also kind of feed in to the collective idea about what the character is like. So they might say, oh yeah, Draco Malfoy, he really likes ice cream or something. And then everyone that is into Draco Malfoy be like, oh, okay, ice cream. Maybe I'll script something about an ice cream parlor next time.
Okay, wow. And what about real people? Can they script in, like, say, an actor to meet up with them? Does that
Yeah,
happen?
that's a really good question. I haven't come across that personally, but I think it probably is possible. I have come across people saying that they should be careful when they're scripting real people, but then there's also the belief that there are like many, like millions and millions of parallel worlds out there. So anything that they can think of exists out there somewhere, so that they just shift into that reality where that thing happens, or where they are, on a date with a certain person, for example.
Okay, yeah. Wow, the mind is so, or whatever it is so creative.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing.
Yes,
Sorry,
hello.
quick question. I might have missed something. I'm trying to figure out astral projection or out-of-body experiences, from my understanding, generally have a lot of creative element to them. That is, when you're out of body, a lot of desires, if I desire to go somewhere, you'll end up projecting there very quickly, very rapidly. So it seems to be a very emotion-based kind of realm. Is it possible that this reality shifting is literally an out-of-body experience or an astral projection where they're just superimposing their own fantasy in the immediate environment?
Yeah, I think it is possible, especially because there are so many other characteristics that are similar to astral projections. And I spoke to Jürgen Ziva, who has been astral projecting for decades and has written books on it. And he said that he's been astral projecting for like 50 years. So he's an older dude, and he has seen like a cartoon OBE. But in that OBE, he saw two people that seemed to be kind of directing it and, using their thoughts to create or manifest that cartoon world. So for him, it's definitely an astral projection, but these astral worlds can be formed with our thoughts or our emotions.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Speaking of making a comment, it seems to me it's a new way of living vicariously, especially during lockdown, through television and other media. I mean, the best films you see are the ones you get into emotionally. So you identify with certain characters, and if you don't like any of the characters, you usually tune out. So there's a lot of emotional commitment going on. So can you comment on that, and that it's basically living life vicariously, but there's also certain types of people that do it really well, like they can lucid dream and so on?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely correct, that people, especially during lockdown, or even now that lockdown is finished, but people have a lot of worries about the future, and it is definitely like a safe space for them, and they feel safe with these characters as well. They feel like they have an intimate relationship with them. So I definitely think that it is a way to live vicariously, whether that's, I think it's usually a healthy way of living vicariously, and it can sometimes become an obsession and, just be a form of escapism, which doesn't really help you with your waking life. But I think generally it is a healthy, sort of almost like a form of therapy for them.
It's also, does it correlate with any other psych measures like dissociation? Have you looked into the psychology and taking the psychoanalytic approach? And
yeah, there are quite a number of articles about it that are saying that, and people commenting online who especially think that shifting is unhealthy and it's teaching people how to dissociate. But at the same time, dissociation can also sometimes be a coping mechanism. So some people believe that the OBE itself, sometimes it happens during abuse, especially with children. And some people believe that it is a way of protecting your mental health from what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely can be, seen as a form of dissociation for sure.
Yeah. It's just a question of how extreme it gets.
Yeah,
it's taking over your life, like anything like gambling or whatever. It might be healthy until it becomes destructive to your family.
Yeah. I do wonder too how it's going to how it's going to be in the future too, because there are artificial intelligence based virtual reality programs and even artificial intelligence based cartoons for children where they can actually speak to the characters, and as they go on, the characters learn how that person speaks and what they're interested in, so it becomes more custom for the individual using that technology. So in the future, as we become more and more saturated with artificial intelligence characters and virtual reality and augmented reality, this could be something that people are immersed in, not just in altered states of consciousness, but they might have altered states of consciousness with these characters, but also when they're awake to be able to have very realistic interactions with them. So it might really take over people's lives in the future, possibly.
Wow. Thank you. We've got another question. Spirit guides often appear in surreal or past realities. This may be a modern version of people connecting with spiritual guide or spiritual realities.
Yeah, that's the idea of shape-shifting or kind of masking. So that's something that I've come across a lot. So not so much with the shifting generation, but with a lot of other people, they'll believe that they encounter an entity in an OBE and it might look a certain way, but it feels different. It's kind of similar to if you have a dream of you dreaming that you're with your friend, but it doesn't look like your friend, but you just know that it's your friend. So that can sometimes happen with an OBE too. So I've talked to somebody who saw the girl from The Ring, the film The Ring, the really scary girl with the long black hair. And one person believed that it was in a haunted place and they were having an OB in the haunted place to see what happens. And that actually, that was inspired by a book that I read, and I did an experiment on that. That was influenced by Cal Cooper's book, Conversations with Ghosts. It was written by Alex Tannis, a medium in the 70s, and Cal Cooper kind of had it published and edited it. And so that's something that the medium Alex Tannis would do. He would go to a haunted location and go out of body to see what was there. So this girl that took part in this experiment, she went out of body in this haunted location and she saw the girl from The Ring, and she believed that it was the ghost that haunts it, but they were able to shapeshift into something that they knew would scare her. And somebody else I talked to had an OBE and also saw the girl from The Ring. But even though she looked really scary, he felt like she was protecting him somehow, almost like a kind of a gargoyle. You know, gargoyle looks scary, but it's there to protect from, you know, actual evil demons and that kind of thing. So, and then again, I have come across people who might see a certain character or figure in their OBE and they feel like it's their guide, but they're showing themselves a certain way because it has a specific meaning to them. That also comes up with UFOs and contactees as well, that aliens can mask themselves so that we're not afraid, for example.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. Another question, please. Can this happen unintentionally or uncontrolled?
Yes, definitely. So there are some reports of people shifting unintentionally, for example, after binge watching something and falling asleep, and then they find themselves in that TV show. And something kind of similar happened to me as well. I was binge watching this zombie series a few years ago before lockdown. And as I was going to sleep, I was really into lucid dreaming at the time. And it was really strange. I was kind of passively watching my dream unfold. And it was almost as if I was seeing my brain, I don't know, process the images from the TV screen. But it was all to do with that zombie that zombie show. So my brain was kind of not telling the difference between the on-screen and off-screen worlds and going, okay, now when I'm outside tomorrow, I need to be careful of the people around me because they might look normal, but they might be zombies. And I was sort of identifying with the protagonist in that dream. So it was really interesting to see the dream unfold lucidly. Just watch what your mind is doing behind your back when you're asleep normally.
Wow.
It also brings to mind some schizophrenia symptoms. I think it's that film with Russell Crowe, A Beautiful Mind. That mathematician, John Nash, had a couple of characters that hung around the whole of his life. One was a little girl, and I think there was a guy as well. And years later, he woke up to the reality that the girl was never growing up as he grew up. And he realized they were like tulpas or some character that his mind had created. So this shifting sort of mind, that kind of phenomena, but it's more elevated, I think, because this
definitely
is happening around the clock.
I think the difference is too, because I've talked to some people that have, symptoms of schizophrenia, and they say like, oh, my doctor said I don't have schizophrenia. I'm just, autistic or something like that. But then they might not tell their doctor everything that happens. They might not say the negative experiences that happens. So I think the difference is that with schizophrenia, it's often triggered by negative life experiences. And so with that comes, some of these experiences might be coping mechanisms, just like the OBE can be a coping mechanism, and dissociative identity disorder and like having multiple alters or personalities can be a form of coping. It can be the mind trying to protect you from, bad mental health. So there's that way of looking at it. And then all of these other symptoms that come with it, so those coping mechanisms, if the person goes to a doctor, it gets seen as schizophrenia, whereas other people who it might not be bad enough for them to see a doctor, or they might just see it as a spiritual thing, they might have very similar experiences to the person with schizophrenia. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as schizophrenia at all. I'm just saying like it depends on who you go to. If you go to a shaman, they might say something different, or they might not. If you go to a spiritualist church, they might say, it's just spirits. But I think definitely these experiences are similar across the board. Yeah.
It could be a question of degree as well. I mean, if you may have characters, if you're good at lucid dreaming, or passable at it, and these characters appear, or you create them with the schizophrenic, they just pop out of that reality and are there in their real life.
Yeah,
it's like an elevated form of lucid dreaming. I mean, they've passed that stage. They don't have to do the lucid dreaming. These characters just all the time.
They bleed through into this reality.
Yeah.
Well, anyone got any more questions for Sam? Or anything they want to say? No?
I
think we're all gobsmacked.
Yeah, I know.
I hope I was making sense, because I'm quite, like half asleep still. So
it's very
part
new.
of your waking dream.
It's all very new. It's all very new to us, and we're trying to relate it to what we do know.
Yeah, that's right.
So the idea and lucid dreaming and schizophrenia and living life vicariously and getting into characters in your favorite shows or whatever, it all merges together, trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, I actually, that reminds me as well, that about a week ago, I was speaking to somebody who does Bwiti rituals with Iboga in West Africa. And his daughter is really into video games and stuff. She's going to school in Montreal soon to study video games. And she's really into cosplay as well. And he said the Bwiti rituals are like a horror, what's it called? Rocky Horror Picture Show. So they're putting on, it is kind of similar to cosplay. They're putting on a show for the patients or the clients, because there's something healing about that, about creating stories and creating, I don't know, immersing yourself in a story. And when I told him about shifting, he said, it sounds very similar to that, but they're doing that themselves, this generation.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, I never knew young people were into this.
I know of
I-
I know of a case, but I don't want to reveal too much because he confided in me, so I can't say too much. But it now makes sense that that's what he was doing.
Has anyone totally just lost sense of their groundedness in this reality and just just couldn't focus on one reality at a time and just kept shifting and just go a bit mad?
I think I'm trying to think of any examples with shifters themselves. I mean, there are people that said that they were shifting and it became obsessed. They became obsessed with it and it wasn't good, so they stopped. But I have heard of people who have had lots of OBEs, and actually me, I can put my hand up, I'm one of them. So I don't have a lot nowadays. I have maybe spontaneous ones a handful of times a year. But between like 2010 till 2017, especially the first couple of years I was having them, I had them a lot, and I would have recurring places in them as well. And they're so realistic and stable that I actually stopped after a couple of years. I kind of put the brakes on and was trying to intentionally stop having OBEs, because I thought if I keep going, I'm going to probably lose my mind. I'm going to start thinking that this world, this waking world, is just a simulation, like a computer simulation or something. And maybe that's the case, who knows? I'm open-minded to all the possibilities, but I wasn't ready for that shift in cosmology, because that would alienate me from everybody that I know, unless I become friends with simulation theory people.
Yes.
But that would, that's kind of an echo chamber that I didn't really want to go into. And there's other OBEers too who say that they get it spontaneously a lot and they're kind of unable to function. But there's also people who lucid dream a lot who say that they eventually begin to see this reality as a dream as well. And that's also the case for researchers, lucid dream researchers. But it's not something that a lot of people will talk about publicly, because they think that they'll sound crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a child of the 50s. It looks like the Gen Zs might begin the reformation of what we consider parapsychology to be. I mean, the stuff that we currently believe now in my age group is probably going to be disappearing pretty fast. So, yeah,
I think
we're all our fates are linked to what the Gen Zs do, carrying on, because they're going to have kids, right?
Yeah, maybe, or they might have robots. I mean, there's like in South Korea, where I just came from, they have this a problem they've got in the developed world. They've got the lowest birth rate, and they think, maybe, I mean, they also have the most robots in the world. So we might also be replaced by robots. People have AI boyfriends and girlfriends now. So who knows? Like, people in Japan are getting married to video game characters. But yeah, the people that do have kids, I mean, yeah, who knows? It's also a question of who is having children. Maybe it's not the people that are really interested in shifting, that want to be in another reality. Maybe it's people that are into something completely different. But I do think that reality shifters are looking at ideas from previous decades as well, and trying to weave them in to a certain extent. So there's a lot of dialogue about, like, how does this all work? They're looking for answers. And so I think a lot of the ideas from previous generations will be adopted by them too.
thank you. That's a bit scary to think we might be robots or half robots. Lance, yeah, maybe one very last question, because you wanted a question before, Lance.
No, I was just commenting about this guy and his experiences. It's very real, because this character had to make a living. She was a sportsman and had to make a living. And I won't go into details, but he was concerned about whether she was successful in a career and making good money and so on. And it was like this character was in another dimension. And if you start questioning the reality of it, because you sort of think, do they have to work in this world? You pay off mortgages and so on. But I guess it's as real as they want it to be, because they're not really creating like dream characters. You don't really create them either. They almost have their own autonomy, although they can be two-dimensional as well. So it's sort of, I guess it's like, it's creative in the way that artists work, but at the same time, you're concerned whether they're sort of losing touch, with the reality.
It could also maybe be, in our kind of more secular world, maybe it's filling a gap that religious figures or, spirits or ancestors once filled. Like maybe this is a need that humans have, or maybe we feel more isolated, or human relationships are becoming more complicated now for different reasons, or we don't have communities like we did in the past. So it's definitely something to look into, like, why do people feel the need to have these relationships with these characters, and how do they integrate them into their lives, if it's even possible?
I think that's a great point. Yeah. What are the needs that these young people aren't getting, that our modern world isn't providing?
Yeah, that's what my supervisor said too. She said she sees it as not just an obsession with these characters or with media or the screen world, but a dissatisfaction with their current social lives. And this is how they're kind of filling that gap.
Yep.
I can jump in there. It makes me think of some poltergeist cases as well. I mean, when Lance talked about tulpas, it makes me think of the case of Jeff the Talking Mongoose that Harry Price investigated. And Voiry Irving, who was the main kind of agent that Jeff would focus around, all she got was just attention from some locals, but it was attention nonetheless. But what need was it really serving? They didn't really benefit from it financially in any way. 50% of people thought they saw Jeff as well, but you get that with tulpas, like a collective experience. You've convinced other people so much of the reality that they start to pick up on aspects of what you consider the reality to be, and the other 50% never saw anything. But that's Jeff in this kind of spiritual, weird, hybrid mongoose form, and it relates very much to all other kinds of poltergeist activity, where it is more spirit entity and people get involved, and it seems to be filling some sort of need of whoever the agent is if it involves an agent, but it's never always clear as to what that may be. And sometimes it is just an emotional outcry, or just a lot of internal confusion. They're not really sure what it is, because they always say, well, is it this prepubescent period and going through a transition of understanding yourself, your place in the world, your sexuality, and these exceptional experiences seem to help cope with that in some way.
Yeah, and the social development aspect as well, that your social brain is developing around that time in your teens. And there's theories about dreams, the social simulation theory about dreams, that dreams help us to survive socially. And if you look at sleep paralysis, the danger that people see in sleep paralysis is normally social in nature. It's not normally like my room is on fire. It's something that has a mind, and it would be interesting to see maybe if there's a culture where fire does have a mind for them, maybe they would see that in sleep paralysis.
It's just occurred to me too, that have you heard of Jung's active imagination? It's as a form of therapy. I mean, it just clicked now that this is what a lot of them are doing. Active imagination, you either do it through acting acting out, like in sand play with toys and so on, or you can write about it and so on, and you create these characters. So it seems to me a lot of people are doing that, and it does seem
Yeah,
to be a
definitely.
need.
Mm.
It's hard if you don't do
related to
the
that
closest.
as
Sorry, Sam. Yeah,
Sorry.
the closest thing I can think of is when you're a kid, and then you watch Spider-Man or something, and then suddenly you're Spider-Man after you've watched the show. You go out and you be Spider-Man, or and interact with these fictional characters, and you believe it,
Yeah.
which you're supposed to grow out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Some of us don't.
Yeah. So I'm just we're running out of time. Oh, thank you so much, Sam. That was fascinating. That was a real novel subject that I haven't come across in terms of, specifically Gen Z and shifting, and wow. So thank you so much. Yeah, we really appreciate you volunteering your time, all the speakers. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And take care. Have a great night, you guys.
Thanks, Sam.
Yes, thank you, Sam. I thought I would just quickly summarize all the speakers, just maybe one sentence each. So this is what I got from each one. So from Dave, since we can traverse time and space, and especially and ESP ability is in our DNA, how are we interacting with this? So taking the next step to applying it in our lives. With Richard's, our brain is not the same as our consciousness. And with Carl's, there could be maybe a device which we can create to talk to the deceased, or maybe even aliens. And also hope. Is that an emotion that we need to utilize for healing and for coping? And for Sam's speech, can shifting and astral projection become a new source of therapy? Maybe even just temporarily to give us relief from the challenges of our other life. And utilizing our creativity. And is there a need which shifting is providing, which we're not giving in our physical life? So that's my summary. But thank you everyone again for joining us. It's been a long day, but riveting. And thank you again to all our speakers. Hope to do this again later down the track, and I hope you will join us again later down the track. Is there anything that Vlad or Lance wants to say, or Rob, before we finish?
Thanks everybody for attending. It's been a long day, and you've been very patient with us. So thanks for that. I hope you enjoyed all the talks. Covered a lot of different subjects, and so there's a lot to think about. If you have any queries or questions, please contact us, and we'll try to address them. We'll forward them to the right people.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Joy, it's Rob here.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, great.
Quick. Yeah.
Yeah, great job, Joy. Well done. Thank you.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for helping with the speakers.
Thanks for everyone. Thanks for
Sandra.
everyone right around the world tuning in. It's really good.
Yes. Yes, thank you, everyone. Well, we will finish this